There are many interesting case files for the first patients of the RAS Foundation, though I'm not sure which one would be most interesting to inform you of next. Actually, something that may interest you is that we do have an entity with aesthetically similar abilities to that of the Reaper. You're aware that the current Reaper of the Multiverse is an ally of mine, and I have been informed that you also have a sort of variant of the Reaper within your realm. Is that correct, Ares?
Yeah, we got something called God Quellers, or God Reapers. As far as I know, there are only 5 of them. Their prophecy or curse thing that created them was made by the Archon so that something in our world could take out Tarsa. So when she left our world, it seems like that spell or whatever it was that let him get born from 7 generations of gods stopped working. After that, the only way new ones could get made was by being a direct descendant of one of the only 2 God Quellers that existed before we chucked Tarsa out.
Fascinating. Your realm has always intrigued me due to it being locked for as long as I have been traversing the multiverse. It is one of few realms I have not visited in my many thousand-year life. I wonder how these God Quellers would fare against the Archons in their physical forms.
Honestly, I'd bet on Mythil to win any fight you put her in. But I'm not the right guy to ask about crazy multiverse stuff. Didn't even know the Archons had taken physical form until I went to visit one of my descendants at the Trismegistus Academy and got to talking with Evangeline.
Understandable. It doesn't seem many are permitted to go in and out of your dimension. How is it then that you know Evangeline Trismegistus?
Back when Tarsa first got booted from our universe, we sent a few parties of gods to try and track her down, so we could finish her off and she couldn't cause problems for other people. In her final battle in our world, she'd mentioned wanting to find other gods to work with, so we did our best to look for universes that had other versions of the gods from our own universe. Anyway, we got to one particular dimension. That world's overseer came to see what we were up to in his universe. The guy's name was Hermes Trismegistus. Turns out he was actually a god from one of the universes that got merged together to create our universe, M308. But he learned how to jump around to other universes before they all got merged together. Then after all our universes got merged, Tarsa locked our universe while she was the overseer, so he couldn't get back in. Probably a good call him leaving anyway. We already had another Hermes, and he looked a lot like the Egyptian god Thoth. Would have been a whole confusing thing for everybody if he'd stuck around. Anyway, he hopped around, learned a bunch of philosophy in a bunch of different universes, then tried to teach it to other people to help them be better and nicer and happier and all that junk. He had a bunch of kids, became an overseer of a few different worlds to try and help him out. He was alive for a long time, got a bunch of stuff done in his life. I figured he was a pretty cool guy, so even after we gave up our hunt for Tarsa, I made sure to stay in touch with him. Became like a family friend to the guy. Our overseer, Ortis Phonemo, locked our world up so only certain gods could jump in and out, and threats couldn't come from other dimensions to our own world. But I got him to make it so old Trizzy could come in and out as he pleased. That meant I also eventually got to know his great-granddaughter, Evangeline, one of his few descendants who was as chill as he was. For a really good guy, his offspring produced a lot of stinkers. When old Trizzy decided he was done being alive, I still kept in touch with Evangeline, and so, here we are.
Fascinating. I wonder if any of his descendants will end up in our care. Perhaps they already have, I can't imagine I would necessarily know, and if he has had many over multiple millennia, even Evangeline would likely not know them all, correct?
Yeah, sounds about right to me. I can't imagine she would. But, weren't you saying something about some sort of Reaper variant thing you got locked up here?
Oh, yes, forgive me for getting distracted. Because of your affiliation with a Reaper-like being in these God Quellers, a particular patient had come to mind. Patient name, Kanto Kuma. Kanto for short, or alternatively, the Three-Eyed Reaper, as some in his world refer to him. Patient number S316-1. Specialized housing procedures. Like with the aforementioned patient Aldrich, floodlights have been put into every corner and surface of his housing unit and will be used to eradicate all shadows when personnel need to enter his room. As with Aldrich's room as well, phase-shifting walls have been implemented to keep the patient from walking through them. Description: Kanto Kuma in his human form is a 7-foot-tall male with gray hair and rabbit ears spawning from the top of his head. He also has a third eye in the center of his forehead, which is commonly covered by his hair, until he transforms into his demon rabbit form. In this alternative form, he grows to 10 feet tall, becomes far more muscular, and his already immense power increases to a yet unmeasured degree. Along with elevated strength and speed, he can create weaponry in a similar manner to that of a Reaper or God Queller's abilities, though instead of creating his tools from thin air, he transforms shadows into the weapons he desires. He currently has bands on his arms and legs which prevent him from transforming into his further enhanced demon state. But once enough progress has been made in his rehabilitation, we hope to remove these to allow him to responsibly transform as he pleases. In Kanto Kuma's home dimension of S316, there are some select people who are born with demonic abilities. Kanto Kuma is one of them. Unfortunately, most are hunted down and contained by a group called the Samaval Corporation. While none of their personnel remain alive today, Kanto has described them as a standard evil corporation that wants to control and harvest beings with demonic abilities to rule the world. This may be an exaggeration as a result of Kanto having been tortured by them for so long and his sanity not yet being fully restored, but at the moment we are inclined to trust his judgment on the former organization. Kanto was ruthlessly experimented on as they tried to harvest various materials from his body or attempt to control him for over 2 decades. He became more and more feral during the time he was locked in their facility, and the only thing that brought him any peace was when he was allowed, on rare occasions, to interact with another demonically powered inmate called Claire. Her presence was the one thing keeping his flimsy sanity from snapping completely under the torment he was going through. So, when he learned that she died in an experiment, there was nothing left to hold him back. He completely lost his sanity to his rage. While he couldn't tear off the bands that kept him from using his full rabbit demon form, he was able to escape his cell and go on a rampage, slaughtering every single person he came across in that facility. Even with his abilities limited by the bands, he was more than powerful enough to take on the base's employees and security. While some could argue that this slaughter was somewhat justified, unfortunately it is not where he stopped. Still seething with animalistic rage, Kanto Kuma began seeking out the families of the doctors who'd experimented on him, subconsciously hoping that eventually he would slaughter enough of them to sate his rage. The case for him killing captors is understandable, but going after their families is decidedly over the line. He was also not careful about who he killed or harm in his path to find them. He was located and brought into our care so that we could assist him in reverting back to a more sound mind and be convinced that slaughtering more and more people would not change what happened to him, and that there are better, more productive ways he can use his abilities to make his world a better place, helping him see that he can become a force for good, ensuring that others do not have to suffer in the way that he has. I must be honest, describing these patients' case files to you has been an odd experience.
Oh yeah? Why's that, Prof?
Well, it is quite rare these days for me to tell any sort of story uninterrupted. Did you not have any questions or comments about the being I was describing?
I had a few come up, but figured I'd just let you say what you had to say. Like I said, you got a soothing sort of voice. Like you walk some weird line between having the perfect voice for ghost stories and bedtime stories.
Interesting analysis. Though, if you do feel so inclined, I am open to answering questions as I explain more case files. While I appreciate the lack of interruption on a civility level, I have grown accustomed to interruption at this point. Your queries could also be useful to test my knowledge of these patients and help me find gaps in our information on them that I was not previously aware of.
Alright, Prof, can do. So, who else you got?
How is this for another interesting case? Are you familiar with entities found in multiple realms commonly referred to as Xenomorphs?
Can't say that I am, but that's a pretty sweet sounding name.
Yes, well, the creatures themselves are very far from sweet. I contended with many myself in an incident a few months back in Dimension C284, as well as dealt with the difficult task of containing some back in my earliest working days, and am rarely eager to put myself in close proximity to them again. They are creatures whose birthing cycles involve being injected into the body of another being or creature, incubating inside of them, then bursting from that creature's chest, generally killing them, and then rapidly growing to full size, having adopted some traits of the entity they grew inside of.
Oh, that's gnarly. You definitely got my attention with this one, Prof. Wonder what would happen if they incubated inside of a god from my realm.
I can't imagine that would be good for anyone involved. Anyhow, that was merely context for the following patient. Patient name, Prophilos. Patient number, V066-1. Specialized housing procedures. Prophilos's unit is lined with double-layered Teflon walls to prevent acid damage. Behind that, there is an additional layer of titanium, and we have had one of our security personnel who is proficient in magic put up a magic resistance field around his unit. Currently, the patient cannot be let out of his room, and counseling sessions must be done through the door.
Sounds like that's the case for a bunch of people you got. Not being able to let them out of their rooms. Being locked up in the same place all the time might drive them a little more bonkers, right?
Yes, that is a problem we are actively working on solving. We want to provide time and space for all patients, no matter where they are in the redemptive journey, to be able to make friends and build relationships with others who are attempting to improve, while also having the freedom to wander select areas of our facility safely. We are working on universal power suppressors that can suppress the abilities of even our most dangerous patients, but it is difficult to construct suppressors that work on all types of abilities. For instance, Prophilos can use magic, and the type of standard power suppressors I have come across can only limit biological abilities, and do nothing to limit one's magic.
Right. I'll ask some of the gods in my world about that. Got a feeling at least one of them has something that can suppress any kind of power. I mean, Darsa once managed to trick a whole bunch of gods into staying trapped in the Shinto underworld by convincing them that they were powerless. That's probably not the route you want to go, messing with folks' head and whatnot, but makes me think there's gotta be something.
Any help you could provide in that matter would be greatly appreciated. Now, on to the description of Prophilos. He is a humanoid elf with a body partially altered to resemble that of a xenomorph. Currently, his right arm and the left half of his face and neck have been transformed into biology akin to that of the creatures, and he has a tail longer than his body, which is also similar to that of the xenomorphs. He is a proficient sorcerer who is studying the magical arts in his dimension of V066 prior to his body taking on these transformations. In his realm, magic is common, but as are xenomorphs, who, despite in most realms being very violent hunters, have been domesticated through the use of magic. They were even able to alter the domesticated xenomorph's reproductive cycle so that they no longer require incubating in a host body.
They managed to alter the birth cycle of a whole species? How'd they pull that off?
Unfortunately, the only explanation we have on that front thus far is to wave our hands and say, magic. It is something I was curious about myself, but we have not put any resources on learning the details because it was not technically relevant to the rehabilitation of the patient. I would like to learn what was done eventually, but I am ensuring to not abuse the vast resources I have at my disposal. I have been entrusted to use what I am given to help our patients, and I will stay disciplined in maintaining focus on that task. You have my word.
I already agreed to help you, Prof. You don't need to keep selling me on this place or you being in charge of it.
Well, I appreciate that. I suppose I am still somewhat guarded, as, frankly, it feels too many people have let me off the hook too easily for my past actions. I do still have some conflicting views about what I have done in regards to the overseers of the multiverse, and I do also question myself if I am worthy of running this organization. So, in attempting to convince you, I am really working still on convincing myself.
I mean, like you already sort of said, Prof, who better to run a place about helping redeem people who have done a lot of bad stuff than someone who's gone through that process themselves? Don't worry about it so much. I mean, I've never led an organization, but I have led armies before. One of the most important things you gotta remember about being a leader is if you're acting all doubtful and panicky, your troops are gonna act that way too. They've already decided to follow you, so show them that you deserve to be followed.
That is very wise advice. I appreciate your counsel, Ares, and I'm that much more glad you will be working with us. Anyhow, Profilus claims that he came into contact with an unusual black slime which began mutating his body into a state like that of a xenomorph, and, as he puts it, through it was shown the cruelty that has been done to his kind by forcing the creatures to become slaves to other beings, such as the elves and humans of his realm. We are still investigating how exactly this slime came to be, or if it is actually what began his transformation in the first place, but if what he says is accurate, then it is possible that this substance was made as some sort of natural biological defense on the part of the xenomorphs to return them to their former state and demeanor as ruthless hunters, not bound to loyalty of any other species. Alternatively, some have posited that this may have been created by another sorcerer, or even by Profilus himself in experimenting with magic and a xenomorph specimen. At the moment, it is difficult to trust what exactly Profilus says about his story, as he is still hell-bent on using his altered state and his magic to lead an army of xenomorphs and make his kind, as he now refers to the creatures, the dominant species in his world. While a large percentage of xenomorphs in his world have been domesticated, there are still a fair number to be found out in the wilds, who still have their original demeanor and reproductive cycle. These have proven to instantly follow the direction of Profilus, and he was only found and brought into our care after the overseer of his world left V066, seeking anyone that could put an end to this being's tirade. He had already destroyed 3 small towns and 1 major kingdom, with the number of xenomorphs under his command growing with every raid. He is what I imagine will eventually turn into the more standard sort of patient we have on site. He is incredibly powerful and dangerous to his world, and is convinced that what he is doing is right. It is our task to find out if his mind is being controlled by this slime he came into contact with, determine if we need to return him to his original state, how exactly we'd go about doing that, or see if he can be taught to use this altered form for the betterment of his world and others. Having the power to command xenomorphs could make him very helpful in many other realms in which the creatures are a problem. Now, here is a case that raises some philosophical and religious questions in regards to a soul. As you may know, overseers have the ability to see into the energy makeup of all beings, and within that there is a core essential energy in all sentient beings which cannot be duplicated, called a golden energy or soul energy.
Sure, gotta pretend I knew that was a thing. I think Ordis might have mentioned something about that at some point, but anyway, go on.
Well, some believe that this soul energy is your actual soul, your true psyche, though some believe that it is only a beacon of sorts, that your soul exists outside this energy and is channeled into your body through it. The reason this is relevant to our next case file is because he has allegedly sold his soul in an exchange for immense power. So the question stands, is it actually possible to sell your soul, or is the thing he has traded merely the beacon for his soul?
Okay, interesting. Gotta say, if it is just a beacon, then that's a pretty sweet deal for anyone who has sold their soul. If whoever they sold it to wants to control them or torture them or something for all eternity, then their actual soul could just be like, no thanks, and stop channeling through that beacon, right?
I suppose that is possible, but that also implies that someone could simply decide to stop having their soul channel into a source. I imagine that would be as difficult as sitting here and trying to tell your body to not digest your food anymore, or to tell your heart to stop pumping blood.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So, what do you think?
To be completely honest, my views of life and the multiverse have been shifting so dramatically in the last year that I have a difficult time determining what exactly I believe the truth to be. Either way, I think selling your soul is an incredibly foolish thing to do, as the implication that you have a soul suggests that you do exist infinitely beyond your current life, and if that is true, then selling your soul for any sort of benefit during this one lifetime is gaining you good graces for a minuscule period of your full existence. And yet, some beings, like this being in our care, still deem it worth doing anyhow. Though, this one did so for more benevolent means than some. Patient name, the Void Master or the Dark One. Patient number, V856-1. Specialized housing procedures. Every possible precaution currently available has been made to ensure this patient stays contained. His cell has been enchanted and reinforced with adamantium walls, as well as additional phase-shifting walls. Security cameras are constantly watching with an artificially intelligent program set to alert our personnel of any unusual behavior. Should a containment breach seem even remotely possible, our most powerful security personnel will be sent to his unit to prepare for recapture. Should this being ever escape, we'll likely put you on the team in charge of getting him back in his housing unit.
You're making this guy sound pretty tough there, Prof. What kind of powers he get from that soul deal?
That is a bit difficult to explain, as are his origins. It's all a bit up in the air. All we have to go off of thus far are the legends of him from his world, V856, as he has not yet shown the ability to speak. It seems the tale of him is used as a lesson to children in that world to teach them not to make deals with any sort of devil that may come offering them. But there also seems to be a fair amount of validity to the tale. The legends in his world, a world which has its own variants of gods similar to ones that may exist in your own realm, state that he was once a humble peasant with a loving family. He was approached in his dreams by an entity draped in pure blackness. This being of blackness offered him immense power in exchange for his soul. The man refused initially, but was then convinced by the being that some great threat was coming for his family, and that the surest way to save them was with this power. This convinced him to accept, and, while he was granted immense power, as promised, it was also power that could not be controlled while in an elevated emotional state. He was given the ability to fly, had immense strength and speed, could manifest limbs of darkness and even entities of darkness to do his bidding. But his body deteriorated, then reformed multiple times, leaving him in an ever-shifting state with changing numbers of eyes and limbs, and his body seemingly becoming hollow and empty, save for shadows and darkness. Soon after gaining these powers and seeing his shifting form, he became so frightened of himself that fear elevated dramatically more, and he even became afraid of his own family as they attempted to calm him. The abilities amplified this fear so dramatically that everything within his sight became terrifying to him. He ended up slaying his own family out of this fear. His fear then turned into anguish and depression when he realized what he had done. It is stated in the tale that, in a sense, the being that gave him these abilities had not technically lied. There was a great threat coming for his family, and only with power as vast as what he now possessed could he stop it, but he himself was the coming threat, and only he could have stopped himself, as no single god was powerful enough to diminish his new might.
That is some crazy loopholes you gotta jump through to justify that this guy wasn't just outright lying in that deal.
Yes, it is a tale that does not make complete logical sense to me, but it seems to do its task of discouraging others from making deals with dark beings that may visit them in the night. Anyhow, he was allegedly able to find the being that gave him these powers, and with those very powers he killed the original Dark One, raising more questions about whether or not his soul is still possessed by this now deceased being. Some in his world questioned whether he had any soul left at all after that point, but we have confirmed with an on-site overseer that while his soul energy is faintly lit, it is still present within his body.
Well, that ended up being a pretty terrible deal for both of them then.
I concur. Anyhow, all his humanity seems to have vanished from him after losing his family and taking the life of the being who made the deal with him. His depression turned to emptiness. He thereafter went on to float around his world, killing any beings or creatures he came across. The reasons for these actions are unknown, as he no longer communicates with anyone he interacts with. It took dozens of gods of his realm to get him restrained, and they claimed that for a time they'd managed to banish him to the void between worlds.
So like the same place the Ark gods used to live before they took physical form?
That is one theory as to what this void is, though, again, this is a fact that is very difficult to confirm. Regardless, after several hundred years, he managed to reappear in his world and began killing senselessly once again. The gods considered sending him to the Void once more, but one of them sought advice from Evangeline Trismegistus, and that is how the being ended up in our care. He is one of the more difficult cases as we have little understanding of where to start with him. He either will not or cannot communicate with us, so it is difficult to counsel him. For the time being, all we can do is contain him, but we are actively looking for ways to get through to him and find out how we can help him properly mourn his past and find a way to move more positively into the future.
Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you with this one. What happens if you never find any way to get through to him?
Well, he seems to be an ageless being, and I am not that anymore. I will live the rest of my life trying to help patients like this Void Master, no matter how hopeless some cases may seem, and if I am not able to help them, I trust that future generations who run the RAS Foundation after I've passed will succeed at what I failed to do in my own lifetime.
That's a good answer there, Prof. I like that attitude. By the way, you want a spinach puff?
Where did you get the... Yes, I would. Thank you.
And so that concludes the October 2024 two-part community redraw. Thank you to Lil Viper66 Art on Instagram, Stefan Moore, and Kevin Spud, who were all chosen for today's episode. If you want to participate in November's redraw, I'll have the prompt up on screen. I also posted it for free on Patreon, where all my inks and high-resolution art go up there a day after a video is released, or not always a day after, but, soon enough. Again, if you want to know more about the character Ares, and you haven't checked out Mytholethal, that's the place to find him. That's where he was introduced, and he plays a pretty big part in that storyline. And I am actively considering doing community redraws in Fear of the Demon Hunters, the Trismegistus Academy, and Starseed Psyche, all of which are currently running series. Haven't decided for sure, but if you want to be ready for those if they happen, you might want to check out any of those series. They're all pretty early on in their episodes so far. Also, my proofreader Kathleen is finishing up Vigilance this week, then I'll go back through the changes quickly, and hopefully have a new official release date announced very soon. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, or maybe more thought-provoking, I guess. And today's quote comes from Carl Jung, who said that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that are important to you. I know there have been times in the past where I've been around plenty of people but felt really lonely because I didn't feel like I could talk to them about the stuff that I wanted to talk about. So if you're in that place of feeling lonely, for one, you may need to just try being more vulnerable with the people that you care about and sharing more with them, or you might need to try finding some other people that you feel more comfortable opening up to. Or maybe a little bit of both. Anyway, I hope that's helpful or inspiring to someone out there. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. The next episode in the Trismegistus Academy. I'll see you there. Goodbye.